Hello.
Namaskar, sir.
Namaskar. Very good.
So, welcome to this workshop. So, we'll start. एक काम कर, connection से internet. Start?
Yeah, we can start. No problem.
Now I welcome Dr. Kadam sir. He's a team member of, I can get Samir Sahasrabuddhe sir, because Samir Sahasrabuddhe sir has given so many speakers in entire workshop for us. So one more person is there, that is Dr. Kapil Kadam sir. He is a researcher in the area of educational technology, and especially in the development of students' special skills. He completed his PhD in the education technology from the IIT Bombay, BTech from KIT College, Kolhapur, MTech from Walchand College, Singli, because he might be one of my colleague, I can say, because I also done PG, post-graduation from Walchand College. Currently, he works as an education consultant. He has offered MOOC courses to the IIT Bombay X about fundamentals of 3D visualization. He has also conducted several faculty development programs across India for the topics like an active learning, ICT tools, and flipped classroom, online teaching, blended learning, education technology research, and content delivery. His research typically interest is education and technology, development of special skills, computer science, education center, technology enabled learning thinking skills, that is what most important, and augmented reality, e-learning and augmented reality. In addition to research, he is a blender enthusiastic, because he gave a training for Blender typically. So he is going to give a brief idea about how to use this animation and how it can be taken for a teaching learning process more effectively. So thanks to the Dr. Kapil Kadam that he has accepted our invitation within a very short notice. I am very much thankful to Kapil sir. Now I'll request Kapil sir to start his session. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much, Professor Deshmukh, for having me. So I would be stopping my video so that I can utilize the bandwidth. Now, welcome everyone, and I hope everyone is in a good spirit, and this is a good opportunity for me also to share my experiences, thoughts, and exposures about assessment. Considering all of you must have been a huge amount of experience in teaching and creating assessment, there are a lot of assumptions that I have at the moment. Like, you must be already comfortable in creating your own assessments. Okay. So I'll start with the presentation.
Yes. Yes.
You can see the presentation. Okay. So the important point I would like to mention at the beginning is, since this will be a webinar, it will have most of an informative session, few demonstrations or examples. So the agenda of today's webinar would be discussing or knowing more about, or revising rather, I would say, about the assessment. So major factors are what is assessment, why assessment, and how to do assessment. Then deciding different assessment activities, and then assessing students online. That is, I would say, one of the major reasons for what we are here. And I would discuss few examples of Mentimeter, then a couple of examples of Padlet, and then I'll show some examples from Moodle. So let us start with what, why, and how of the assessment. So before going further, I have a quick activity for you. So you must have been practicing these kind of activities. So this is the activity where you have, rather than saying activity, I have a quick question. What is the purpose of assessment? So if you can just post your responses in the chat window, all of us can get to know what is your purpose of assessment. Your time starts now. So you can start with responding in the chat window. Grading the students. Nice to see you, Kapil. Yeah, thank you. Hi, Jitendra. So I see, now this is what I wanted to say, because I just very normally said I want you to respond in a chat window. So how much as an instructor I'm able to engage you, whether I am trying to enforce this activity on you, or whether as a participant or a learner you are really interested into participating in the activity. So these factors really affect the learning, teaching and learning process. Okay, assessment gives you idea about student understanding for evaluation, to guide the students for his future progress. Great. Somebody please mute the siren. So to guide students for their future progress, getting to know how much knowledge they have absorbed, to judge the level of students, to evaluate knowledge and gain by students, collect information from students, to get feedback of how much they have understood the topic, to measure learning outcomes. So it's interesting. Assess the learning of students and to chart further course of teaching learning. So it's a very quite interesting responses that we have. You can say I've just tried to compile some of my from my existing sessions, as well as you can see some of your responses. So broadly, there are vague ways that we have. So most common reason or purpose as an academician that we have as a teacher is that students NSEM assessment or students regular unit assessment, right? But that encompasses the reasons to find out their prior knowledge, to find out the student's interest, to understand the extent of learning that has happened. Also, the assessment helps analyze to what extent teaching strategy was effective. Then, whether as a teacher you want to move to the next topic or not, the assessment can tell you this also. So also whether students or which students need help on certain topics, that can be understood from the assessment. Also, if the learner is ready for higher level, and then how to plan next session, or if you want to improve your course, and few responses said that achieve whether the learning objectives have been achieved or not, then comparing or ranking the students, and then in the form of rewards, then you can do the filters or screening by pass and fail remarks, then to standardize the test or assessment. Most commonly, or most importantly, the assessment is also been used for accrediting organization as well as teachers. So this is the exhaustive list of why we do assessment. So can we categorize these assessment purposes into few forms? So most of you must be already aware of these three forms, where the assessments have different types. One is diagnostic assessment, then there is a formative assessment, and then there is a summative assessment. Most commonly we use formative and summative, but students majorly focus on the summative nature of the assessment. They are always focused about their grades in the NSEM examinations or their Viva examination. So there are a few, so if you want to know what is summative assessment, so it is to understand students' level of knowledge in order to categorize rank or selection for job, scholarships, or standardization, then standardization of the organization. These kind of the examples of summative assessment. I'll talk about each assessment type in detail in the upcoming slides. Here I'm just giving the broad overview of the assessment. So here you can see formative assessment is used for giving feedback for enhancing students' learning, and that can be immediate feedback. Then reinforcement, where behavior modification, where you can have rewards and check their motivation. Also assessment to prepare future. So in the formative nature of the assessment is more continuous rather than a summative. And at each level of your unit or subsections, we can check for whether the learning objectives have been met or not. Now, contrary, the diagnostic assessment is mainly done to understand the level of students' knowledge to inform course implementation or to know the prior knowledge of students. So coming back, what do people use assessment for? So let me start with summative assessment. The summative assessment, or rather we can say assessment of learning, correct? So always this is a very key point for all of us to remember. It is assessment of learning. So this definitely provides an opportunity for student to demonstrate the knowledge and skills that they have acquired over the period of time. Right? So there, it can tell you what students can do. Then you can evaluate the students with respect to some standards or some benchmarks. Then you can evaluate the students with respect to each other, that is relative grading that we already know. What are some examples? Some examples are nothing but NSEM exams, that is semester exams, job interviews. Some of you can say that PhD Viva or oral exam, final oral examination are of the nature of summative assessment. Now, jumping to the formative assessment. So, where the summative assessment was assessment of learning, here the formative assessment can be termed as assessment for learning. Right? So, there's a quick in between that. So this provides multiple opportunities for students to practice their skills and apply rather than a final summation. Okay? So, here this kind of assessment can continuously analyze students' progress in order to achieve the goal. So these are the major factors where this formative assessment can be ongoing. It can occur every day, every lecture or unit or every term, right? It can determine where student actually stands, what is student's progress. Then you can have feedback to change their learning. You can have pointers for the next steps to be taken. The emphasis is not much on the grades. So what are the examples of it? So examples are discussions. The discussions can be in the form of think, pair, share in the face-to-face classroom. In an online classroom, it can be discussion forums, peer instructions. There are some active learning strategies. These are the active learning strategies. Then predict, observe, explain is one of the strategy. I'll give one example in the further slides about POE. Then midterm project evaluation, as you all are aware. Now, diagnostic assessment. So this kind of assessment happens before learning, correct? So before starting the course or starting the lectures, you can actually diagnose so many information about students. So you can diagnose what students does not know, or you can determine what knowledge and skills students have or they bring in the classroom. Then you can figure out or identify the individual differences among the students, so that accordingly you can plan your sessions and accordingly you can plan your further assessments. So how you can tailor the instructions. So based tests, these are the tests, and there's some language entry test where students can decide whether you should go for basic, intermediate, or advanced. Correct? Even in engineering institutes, we can think of which course students want to learn. Some of the examples, if I tell you, let me talk about psychology example. So here instructor can survey students' assumptions about the concept that will be taught in the course. For example, nature of mind or behavior. So these kind of concepts are more open-ended. Students may or may not be aware the technical definitions or the real meaning of it. So it is always better to know what prior knowledge they have. So there are other examples. One of them is from physics, and I would like to mention the example of course with group work. So suppose you have a course where it is mainly based on group work or the collaboration. So here you can actually survey students' prior experiences about how they work with group and what are their attitudes to work towards working in group. So this will definitely tell you in forming the groups which students are comfortable with which other students. Now, before starting the next slide, I want everyone to be alert, and because I have an activity where you are supposed to go to Mentimeter. So just to check so go to menti.com, menti.com, and enter this code. So I can actually paste this link in the chat. Okay, so once you enter this code, you will find these multiple options where you can select your choice. The question is very simple. Have you used Mentimeter to present before? Yeah. Here I can see there are a few responses coming up. If people are actually, so what I can diagnose here is how many of you are actually aware of this tool, correct? So that accordingly, if I have to take Mentimeter, I can plan accordingly. So I can say that this can activity diagnostic, correct? So in live classroom, if you want to see how many students are actually actively listening to your lecture in an online mode, considering there are technical issues of bandwidth or network or app is not loading or site is not working, apart from that, actually you can get to know how many are actually participating. So what I can say is almost there are 300 participants are live now, and I'm receiving almost like 10 to 13 responses. So what can I interpret with these kind of information? So either they are having exposure or they are not at all interested, or they have just started their screen and they are roaming somewhere in the room, and or maybe they are just listening to the audio, correct? So there are a lot of possibilities and concerns that we have to think when we do the online lecture and courses. Or most of participants have a tendency that I'll take the slide later. Anyway, these are the concerns that we want to see. So here, what I can see, if a good point that I just change it to percentage. So 50% people are saying that they have used Mentimeter, and 50% have said they have not used Mentimeter. Correct? I'll wait for a couple of seconds. Okay. So those who have not used Mentimeter, so I'll have few slides. What is Mentimeter? Okay. So Mentimeter is easy to use interactive presentation tool. Also, you can conduct quizzes. So it is a tool to increase student learning and engagement in the classroom or in the online classroom. I use it quite frequently in all of my sessions, and based on the topic, you get different responses. Or based on the what I tips as a teacher, you get a lot of responses. Okay, so in the previous speaker, somebody have already introduced Mentimeter. That's an excellent thing for me, because then I don't need to talk much about it, but I have a very few slides for it. So here you can use this tool for testing knowledge, share ideas, and inclusive. And the most important part that I use Mentimeter is, so remember this, to trigger thinking in the participant. So it is up to us how we can utilize the tool. So tool can have a lot of demonstrations and a lot of examples, but as instructors, how you want to use it. So this particular question, I just use it for right? It is free to use. Eight versions available where you can utilize all the features, but for the regular teaching, I find it very useful and no need to upgrade. But if you want to export the data, or if you want to do the analysis of responses in the form of spreadsheet or something like that, you can always go for the paid version. So how to use it? There's three simple steps. Ask a question, take the audience vote, and present results in a real time, like what we are doing here. Right? So if your teacher present, link is mentimeter.com. If you're a student or audience, you have to use a menti.com. Right? So here I'm a presenter. I can create my presentation. You can create all your presentations in Mentimeter. Also, there is a plugin for Microsoft PowerPoint for Mentimeter is available now. So we will explore that. Okay. One more example, how can Mentimeter be used? The use of Mentimeter in a predict, observe, explain strategy. So the learning of, if you're aware of these examples, it's well and good. If you're not aware, that is also well and good. If you're aware, the learning objective is, as a teacher, I want students to be able to predict the outcome of a phenomena. Now here's a picture that I have shown. This is a screenshot of a video where a helium-filled balloon is attached through a thread and placed inside this plastic box. And box is on the wheels. So what students are supposed to do is, they're supposed to predict what happens to this balloon when this man pushes this cart forward. Correct? So this may generate some interest and the curiosity of the students. Once they predict what will happen to the balloon, we expect them to explain how they have come to this prediction. So in a face-to-face classroom, you can ask them to write it down, or in an online classroom, you can ask them just to think. I'm just checking. Okay, for those who have missed the previous activity, we will go with a new activity where we will have a different Mentimeter code. So it's okay if you have not participated in the earlier activity, not an issue. Right? So now I want students to predict and explain. How this can be done is, you can give them the options: A, move, B, move forward, move back. So what I want all of you to go to menti.com again, and this time enter a different code to participate in this activity. So three things you have to remember. This is a helium balloon attached to a string. This is a plastic box, and the man will push the cart. So what will happen? So you're able to see the screen. You can go to menti.com and enter the code 3825188. Yeah. Yeah, now I can see some responses are happening. So what will happen? Okay, I'll just write the code. Three eight two five 188. Yeah. Apple. So those who are participating can see there are multiple answers that we can see. Now, what this will, why we need these kind of activities? So you can see the different answers. So few are saying balloon won't move. Maximum people balloon will move forward. Few are saying balloon will move backward. So whether all of you are not expressing what is your logic behind his answer, but still there is thinking happening. So as an instructor, my job is to trigger this thinking. So I want you to think about your answer. What is your logic or what is your reasoning? Whether it is correct or wrong, we don't know at the moment. Right? This is how you can use these kind of activities not only to assess but as well as to engage students, and based on that, you can move further in your instructions. So anyway, if you're not able to participate or this is definitely not for assessing your knowledge, but just to demonstrate how you can utilize these kind of activities. So even if you're not able to participate, it's okay. You can see the next part of it. So whoever has said the balloon won't move, just keep thinking about what is your reasoning. Whoever said balloon will move forward, keep thinking about your reasoning. And those who have said balloon will not or will move backward, there must be some assumptions of scientific phenomena you must be thinking of. So let us see who's correct and why it is correct. So now there are ways we can discuss. Either I can simply tell you which is the correct answer, or there is another way where I can have actual video where what happens. And then later on, so I'm not explaining the principles of the reasoning behind it. You can explore own. Now, to create
Hello.
engagement. Hello.
Hello.
So now, hello. So I'm playing the video
Hello.
in slow motion. Hello. Yes. Simply, I'll just show you what happens to a balloon. So now you see the video and balloon moves forward. one of the simple example where you can think of how you want to make it more interactive, and then you can check the understanding with the results, with the visualization, and then you can keep on explaining the reasons, right? So these kind of questions related to it, you can always create and have it interactive assessment as well as the instruction. So another example, we are not Mentimeter, but I just want to demonstrate how Mentimeter can be used. So those who are asking for now, so it's okay if you're not able to participate now. This was for example demonstration. So the recent sessions in chemistry for chemistry faculties. So this was a question asked, and there is another format where you can actually receive the responses. So which is correct and which is wrong. In addition to that, if I have to see who has responded with the correct you can see the names. You can have actual names when students are registered, and you can also collect the data, and it will allow you to do the ranking of students, who's the fastest, or you can create more fun and engaging activities. So you can see this person has responded in this shorter time. So Mentimeter will allow you to create. So I'll show you the actual interface. So Mentimeter will allow you to create these kind of questions where you can write your question here, then different options. You can select which one is correct, and you can display. You can set the which was for the informative purpose. So coming back to the assessment, what are the things or what are the issues that we should worry about? Because either as a teacher, if you're a curriculum designer, or you're a tool or material developer, or whoever is associated with education, right? So based on our discussions now, so what we should assess is either process the final product. For example, having a right answer or the descriptive process, then students' subject knowledge or how they can apply something else. Student creativity can be assessed. So how do we make these decisions? Right? So how to start making these decisions, or how to actually do assessment well? Definitely, I assume that all of us are aware this particular state. We need to align assessment with the learning objective, correct? That's a very apt way to do it. So it is important to repeating that align assessment with learning objective. That is for effective learning, we need to align learning objectives with assessment. So this is a triangle of effective learning, and these are the three major elements: learning objective, instructional activities, and assessment. So for effective learning to take place, we need to align learning objectives with the assessment. So we have seen three major types like diagnostic, formative, and summative. But still, I'll ask a question: what type of assessment formats do we have? So what are different types? How to decide the assessment? Or what does the decision depend upon? So this is a major question that we need to think upon. Okay. So I would say that type of assessment depends on the approach to teaching and learning. So this is very important. So there are different pedagogies or teaching learning methodology that each teacher has. Every teacher has different way of teaching, as well as every subject or a concept in every course has different requirement for actually delivering the teaching learning content. So majorly, depending on the approach, most commonly there are two approaches, like directed approach and constructivist approach. Okay, depending on the approach of teaching and learning, we can have the type of assessment, or our decision depends on these two types, two approaches. So for directed approaches, the major information transmission takes place. So you can have multiple choice questions, short answers, or solving certain problems. Definitely, most commonly it has it typically with unique answers. Then you can expect specific responses from students. So here is emphasis on product or the final answer, not the process. Okay. So we assume that all students must have same skills. So there is some generalizability among students intellectually. However, in contrary, constructivist approach, it is not a very what I can say expected to have a specific answer, but it can have group projects, multimedia product or product development or portfolio or mini projects, or there are multiple acceptable responses. Then there can be a variability in product. So for example, I was listening to last part of the previous talk. It was about website creation. So if you ask the student to create a website for something, each student or each group can come up with different design as well as different functionality or different aspects for the same purpose. Correct? So that kind of examples can be used. So the emphasis is on process, like project-based learning or problem-based learning. Okay, so it is majorly to encourage divergent thinking among students. So what are the values that assessment must have? Based on this, what I could summarize is, so assessment should be fair enough, it should be validated, it should be reliable, you need to conduct this timely, then it should be incremental, it should be demanding for students as well as teacher to increase their performance. It definitely should be of the nature of formative and summative. It should cover all the areas and it should also have different difficulty levels. So what are some other decisions to be taken whether my assessment is time constrained or it is open-ended? So you can think of these questions when I share the slides, but I will just read out for you. So should group work be assessed, or we can assess the individual person in the group? How to assess the group interaction that takes place? For example, when we have students projects in third year mainly or final year, or even in mini projects. So should different learning style be considered? This is very interesting point. So normally in a class of 60, you know that hardly 5 to 10 students or hardly 5 students respond to your questions. The rest of them, they do not respond. Some perform well in the theory, some perform well in the practicals. So there are different ways that students learn. So though there are debates about the learning style, but still we can say that people learn differently. So can we consider those things while we create assessment? Can we standardize that? Okay. So is it having norm reference or are there any criterias? So you can think of rubrics. Then is it a cumulative assessment or time specific assessment? The major aspect is, should technology tools be used? If they are to be used, and then how to use those? How to manage students' records, what to do with the data, how to do the learning analytics, what to do when there are large number of students. So let us revisit the question when I was asking, what do you mean by assessments? Rather, I would say, what do we mean by assessment? So can I say that assessment should reveal how well students have learned, but what we want them to learn. So this is a very important point that I want to make, because we have assumption that every students who have enrolled in our college or in our discipline or in that course, he wants to learn. Based on that assumption, and considering the ideal scenario of teaching learning process where students want to learn and you want to teach and the content is very well planned, we define all the learning objectives or we define all the assessment questions. Still, we face a lot of problems. We still have problems. These questions are not correct, students are not responding, learning is not happening, performance is poor. So many things that happen. Okay, so in an ideal situation, definitely we decide the learning objective based on our courses, but we do not consider what students really want to learn. Considering that what we want them to learn, these are nothing but learning objectives that we define, where we say students will be able to do something. Remember Bloom's taxonomy? It's a very common these days. Now everybody uses the Bloom's taxonomy on different cognitive levels. Are all these learning objectives at same level? Definitely, all of you must be aware of it. So if I just represent it in a different form, definitely, if again I ask, are these levels at same? Definitely not. Okay, these are not at same level. Now, continuing with Bloom's taxonomy and Bloom's level, and the point that I was trying to make is the different decisions that we take while design our assessment and considering that what we want them to learn. So now this is what we want them to learn can be at different levels, correct? It can be of different levels. Sometimes we want them to apply this knowledge, we want them to evaluate something, we want them to create something. Most commonly, every learning objective has this common keyword, like students should be able to understand. But what you want them to understand, what you want them to do, what you want them to say, what you want them to draw or write or explain. Right? So here is, we will not do it in an active form. Rather, I will process it for you. But you can always read these questions and think about the answers. Okay, you can vote it in the chat window if possible. I have opened the chat window so I can see. So if I asked you to rank given assessment questions, so these are some assessment questions. Can you rank it in terms of Bloom's taxonomy? Take a few seconds or a minute to read it and to rank it. And you can post your response in the chat window. So first question is calculate current using some technique. Second is state some condition. Third is design AC motor for locomotive. So find the standards. One is saying A, someone is saying B, someone is saying D. Right? So the moment I receive different responses, I always have a scope to make you think about it. Correct? So if I receive one common response, then either it is wrong or right, and there is a way to give explanation. But when we have A, B, D, C, so certainly it tells that E is wrong. Someone is saying, okay, so given a sequence 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I'm not stretching much on to this, but I'll give you the correct answer. The correct answer is 2, 1, 4, 3. So now the question was based on Bloom's taxonomy. So definitely the Bloom has devised a level of cognition according to you can sort these questions. So definitely state, so let me see what are the reasons to say why B is correct. Here, if I show you the levels of Bloom's taxonomy, the number 2 is at recall level, number 1 is at apply level, number 4 is at analyze level, and number 3 is at create level. Sorry for the D. So create level. So this is how you can think of arranging your you can actually try to create your assessment question based on the Bloom's taxonomy. So now this was about identifying the sequence. Okay. So there is another question that I have for you. Let us see what is the cognitive level of assessment. Now I have a question only. There are multiple options for the question, and we can talk which is the cognitive level of that question. Okay. So for example, if the question is the unit of resistance is, there are 5, 6 options. Definitely R is the correct answer. I'm not interested in the correct answer. But what kind of question is this? This is a recall level question. So why recall level question? Because you just have to recall the facts. You just have to remember previously learned concepts or material. So there is not much thing to do about it. You're not supposed to do the explanation part of it. So you can think of when you can have these kind of questions. Can you have multiple choice questions? Right? Let me ask. Let me show you another a different example. So here is some circuit has been shown, and the question is use nodal analysis. Use something to find something. Use nodal analysis to find the voltage at each node of the circuit. Now, what is the cognitive level of this question? It's an apply level question. Why? Because what apply keyword says is use knowledge in a new situation. It involves certain rules or methods or laws. So if you read carefully, so in order to find the voltage from the given circuit, you need to use the nodal analysis. So you should be very well aware about the nodal analysis. What is nodal analysis? What are the parameters? What are the process? And how you can apply this nodal analysis to find the answer. So you're definitely applying the process of nodal analysis. So that is how you can create apply level questions. The next question is describe the working principle of moving coil galvanometer. So keep your eye on just not the keyword but the connecting statement, because using just keyword will not be sufficient to say that this is at this level. You need to be very careful with designing this next statement. But in this case, definitely you want students to understand the meaning of or the principle of moving coil galvanometer. So here you want them to, by saying describe, you wanted them to explain or interpret or paraphrase the memorized information. Correct? A couple of examples of next levels. So in this question, you have 4 diagrams, okay, 4 circuit diagrams, and the question is what method has been used to control the current of the circuit, current in the circuit. So because you have multiple options, you definitely would try to compare, because you do not have just one circuit. You have multiple options. You will compare the circuits. You will compare the different parameters. So in a way, you will be doing the analysis of this question. So these kind of questions are nothing but at an analyze level, okay, where you are actually comparing the relationship between the parts. Next question is examine or differences the different cases of hydrostatic forces acting on the surface submerged fluid. So you don't need to get into detail of the questions. Don't get irritated or daunted by this electronics questions, but just to make you understand. Okay? So when you say examine, definitely you want to evaluate something. So let me see if it is evaluate or what. Yes. So based on certain criteria, you need to evaluate this and you need to justify your decision. So this is how you can, develop your assessment questions. Right? Now, next part is let us check if these assessment questions are aligned with the learning objective. So what I will have is one part I will have a learning objective, one part I will have an assessment question, and we will just see whether they are aligned or not. So if you can just observe, if you keep on reading and you just follow me, you can verify your answers. You don't need to respond it in a chat window, because I'll be having a lot of questions and it is not a good idea to have a response for each question in the chat window or in a Mentimeter or in any other form. Okay, since this is an informative session, I would like to go ahead with this. Okay, so let me see. This is the learning objective is student should be able to draw some graph, voltage graph for ohmic and non-ohmic resistors. This is my learning objective. So what is my assessment question is, which of the given is the characteristics of non-ohmic resistance? So some of you might say that here you're saying students should be able to draw the graph, but actually in a question I have given the graph, correct? But definitely, in order to even identify the graph characteristics, students should know the graphs. They should be able to know the graphs. So there they will use some knowledge and verify. Right? Yes, the both the learning objective and assessment questions are aligned. Now, what is the level, cognitive level of these learning objective and assessment questions? It is at understand level. So when students actually understand, then only he'll be able to draw the graph. So what I mean is the correct graph, not any graph. So if he draws the graph correctly, then we can say that he has understood something or he has satisfied the learning objective. So in example 2, if I say the learning objective is students should be able to apply Ohm's law in simple circuit. Clearly I'm saying that students should be able to apply Ohm's law. And I'm asking a question on designing a circuit that will give some, so I'm giving some condition, and I want students to design. Now, it's a tricky question. Some of you might think that, of course, in order to design, you may need to apply something. But definitely there are differences in the level. So I think these are not aligned. So let me check if these are aligned or not. Yes, I was correct. So these are not aligned. The learning objective and the assessment question is not aligned. Why? Because the learning objective is at apply level and the assessment question is at create level. So though it is not aligned, I would insist these kind of questions can be also asked, but with few variations and modifications. Okay, let me go with the example. I have only a couple of examples one example after this. So this is the learning objective. Students should be able to calculate something. And you are asking, write mathematical statement for Ohm's law. Definitely this is not aligned. Definitely this is not aligned. Correct. This is not aligned. Why? Because the cognitive level of learning objective is at apply level and assessment question is at recall level. Definitely this kind of mismatch should not work. So in a way, what I want you to remember is, though you're already familiar with the Bloom's taxonomy examples, the reason I showed you a lot of examples because though we create assessment questions, we forget to go back to the roots and the basics. We again get worried about how to create assessment questions. So you remember, always create a series of questions for a given topic that go from recall level to create level. From recall level to create level. Correct? You can always create a question bank for various topics so that we can use them while framing assignments and exams. Imagine you have a whole course to run for a semester, you have 10 chapters, each chapter can have different level of questions, you have categories, you have a database of questions. Correct? Now, the important part is you must be thinking, we all know this, correct? So we want you to talk something about how we can do it now in the current situation or in the online situation. So we'll talk, we have already seen few examples. We will see some more examples in the upcoming slides. But always remember, you need to align your questions in the Bloom's taxonomy and the other aspects of it. So for those who want to revise what is Bloom's taxonomy, this is just a quick view slide for all of you. Or even if you don't want to read it, we can have, I will always share the slide so you can take a look at it later on. Okay. Some more examples. I will not be reading. This is for this is as a resource that I'll be sharing with you. You can always look at it. For maths, you can have different levels and different assessment questions. This is for reference. Then for digital logic and engineering, the topic is logic gates. You can see the different levels and assessment questions. For fluid mechanics or fluid static, you can see different questions. Okay, and here is the list of action verbs if you're trying to define your cognitive levels for learning objectives, what you want to do, and these are the action verbs. So based on that, you can create your questions. Now, jargons or terminology that we must have discussed. So next part, it is mandatory, I would say now. Everybody should participate in the activity. If you are having coffee, if you're drinking, or if you're eating food, or if you're walking, get back to your screen and read about this slide. Okay. So what I'm asking you to do is write brief answers to the following questions. Okay. What you have to do is, what is the most valuable or helpful idea or concept that you learned in this session? I mean, the session that till now. Okay. And what is the muddiest, or you can say the most confusing point about this part of the session? So these are the 2 points that I want you to think, and I want you to post your responses in Padlet. I know that some of you must have used Padlet or have experience about the Padlet. So I don't respond in the chat window. Respond link. So once you go to this link, you can see this interface where the first part you can click on the plus sign and add your response. Same for the second column. I will share the Padlet link in the chat window. Yes. So I want all of you to go to Padlet. It's a very simple code. Just copy paste or click on the link. You will be directed to, I'll open my Padlet. So you can see so here you can add your responses by clicking plus. Same time, you can see the others' responses. If you want to rate it, you can rate, or if you want to add comment or expand their response, you are always have a possibility to do that. If I read, Mentimeter for assessing learning, applications of Bloom's taxonomy with tricky questions, mapping assessment with learning outcomes, how to create questions, aligning Bloom taxonomy, how to evaluate, assessment should be in line to learning objective. I couldn't get the examples of Bloom's taxonomy being from pharmacy. Okay. See, this is what is important. So here you can anonymously post your questions. We can respond to this. I will respond to your comment later. I request participants to respond on a Padlet. I cannot write since nothing happens after clicking on plus. No, if you click on plus, you will see a window. And here you can write your response. So like I was asking, how many of you have used Mentimeter and how many have not used. Similar way, those who are comfortable with Padlet, they know how to use it. For those who are new to Padlet, actually use Padlet for learner engagement as well as make discussions more interactive. Let me see, I could not get the pharmacy. Need some guidance for formulating more tricky questions related to applications. Nothing, which is most. Okay. So you could see normally in a face-to-face classroom, if I had to do the same thing, I would have asked simple questions to the students. This can be called as a reflection question. But to tell you, this is nothing but a minute paper. So there's a term, some of you must have been aware of it. Those who are not aware of it, this activity was a minute paper. So what is minute paper? So at the end of each class period or each session, you can ask students to write brief answers to some of the questions. So for example, what is the most valuable or helpful idea or the concept that you learned today? So even in 1 hour lecture, something will strike to their mind. Something will come on the top of something. Correct? Or what is the muddiest point or a confusing point? So it is not necessary that they are actually confused or they are not, but it will allow them to express. So if you see, it doesn't matter how many participants are there, like almost in online form, there are 30 participants, 300 participants. But even if I'm receiving 15 responses, where I have 3 to 4 confusion points and 10 to 12 useful or valuable points, this is accessible to everyone now. So all of you can, even if you're not participating into it, you know the question, you know what others have learned. So suppose your friends, your very close friend has learned that assessment based on Bloom's taxonomy. That's what he understood or he liked. So if you're a shy student or if you do not want to respond, you can anytime ask him or you can anytime read here. Okay. So in a way, this allows as an instructor or a facilitator to provide these kind of a platform, engaging platform for students for knowledge construction. Correct? So this is called a minute paper. Now, so there are different variations you can have in a minute paper. You can ask students to write one sentence summary. So can you imagine like 1 hour lecture and then you're asking one sentence summary? Isn't it something like asking about what is the plot of the movie? What was the plot of the recent movie that you have seen? So normally people give feedback in one statement. So this is really interesting. That is how they understand. Okay, so you can always do that thing in your classroom. Then to make it more real life connecting, you can ask what is the potential application of today's content. So if I asked you what is the application of today's content, so already you have responded with something. What is the confusing point or muddiest point in today's class? So those who are actually attending carefully, they will have a lot of questions. Those who are not actively engaged in the classroom, they might have some confusion or they might have some different kind of clarification questions. So anyway, these, in whatever way, minute paper will always allow you to, make learning more engaging. And this is one kind of an assessment. Okay. So just to tell you, it's not me or somebody or Google saying about it. There are a lot of research and findings that suggest that how well does using minute paper in courses work. So you can read this later on, but I would like to mention. So there's some findings have say that minute paper increased student performances by 0.5 in exams. Now this is based on some empirical studies. So the second part says that the benefits of minutes papers are not dependent on instructor who implements it. So for example, even if at this situation, even if I have given a lot of information or small information whether it is good or bad, useful or not. This activity, those whoever has thought about the minute paper activity must have got benefited, and it is not aligned with whatever I have taught, but definitely aligned with the topic of the course, right? The topic of the session. So this is how a few more findings that suggest that how you can use the minute paper. So there are some classroom assessment techniques. You can think as a face classroom techniques, or and you can think of how you can convert it to online mode. So you can always give 5 to 10 lines summary of last night's reading and include 2 or 3 main ideas. Then you can ask like what were three of the most important points from yesterday's discussion. Then you can ask if you can summarize today's discussion for a friend who was absent. What 2 ideas do you think are the most essential? Suppose you have attended this session and you must have found at least 1 or 2 things, and you want to tell your friend colleague in another college, and you want to tell that, see, I just got to know about the thing or the Padlet thing. I was knowing the Mentimeter, but now I know how I can use it in different way. So this is how you can give these these techniques. You can always ask the students to define in their own words about certain terms. So if you're using terms like summative and formative assessment, and if I ask you, can you write the summative term in your own words? Definitely we have our own understanding and expression, the way of expression. Okay. Then you can always ask about what are the things that went wrong. So these are the few examples. Now, how to convert this in online mode? Definitely you can utilize these platforms like Padlet, Mentimeter, a lot of tools available, but considering the common practices in engineering colleges, the Mentimeter and Padlet are found to be most useful, and you don't need to rely on these tools all the time. One point I want to make is I will not talk about Google Forms because this is the most common, and all of us must be aware that the capacities of Google Form, how we can use it. But sometimes we may not be able to make sessions or the lectures interactive and engaging. So in that scenarios, the Mentimeter and Padlet are always helpful. So if time permits at the end, I can show you a few examples of Padlet I have used in recent sessions. Okay, moving to these kind of assessment questions, what about assessment of projects or designs, or presentations or portfolios? Okay. So there are some goals and constraints that we have in these kind of assessment. So do you want to evaluate the process, or you have to evaluate the process, not only the product? So you can think upon that. The process evaluation will have different evaluation metrics, and the final product will have a different evaluation metrics. You can have it descriptive or diagrammatic. Definitely there is no single measure like if you have 3 different websites designed, or 3 different circuits designed, or 3 different vehicle designs, or these kind of product design, then you definitely will not have a single measure for that, right? So here, traditional assessments not very useful. So I assume that you are all aware of this. So how to do that? So definitely one solution is to use rubrics. I'm not going to talk about rubrics. It takes entirely different session about what is rubrics and how to design it. But you can say that you devise criteria, you devise ratings, and according to that you can evaluate these kind of projects. Okay? Now I'll move to the next part of it. Already I have talked about the Padlet and Mentimeter, how you can use it for, can I say, some level of diagnostic assessment as well as some level of formative assessment. Okay. Now, if you're using Moodle, you must be very well versed with different ways you can assess students online. So I will not show the demonstration, but I'll have some examples from the previous sessions, and you can later on have a detailed analysis of how you want to use Moodle, that is learning management system, for assessing students. So just to before that, we need to have a quick broader view of the different forms of assessment. So we know that there is diagnostic, formative, and summative assessment. So when to use these kind of assessment? Diagnostic, we use it at the beginning of the unit, and the formative we use during the unit of study. So it is before, it's a during, and it's at the end of the study, summative. So what are the key purposes? So for diagnostic, it is for designing instructions, and for formative, definitely for improving students' learning, not just for the sake of it, but for improving students' learning. So summative, providing credentials, scores, marks, and some exams. Already we have discussed these parts, what diagnostic involves, what formative involves, what summative involves, correct? Then, so this is also important point. What is the low emphasis of these kind of assessments? So diagnostic assessment doesn't emphasize on grading on scoring students, as well as formative assessment doesn't emphasize on grading or scoring. And summative assessment doesn't emphasize on providing comprehensive feedback. That's just summative assessment, whether it's correct or wrong, and whether you just want to finish the assessment, right? And then, yeah, this is important point for all the faculties and all the, if you have TAs or technical staff, support staff. So what are the different possible roles for as a teacher or if you are a teaching assistant? So designing and execution of this kind of assessment for both diagnostic and formative. However, for summative, it is more of an execution part. So in a way, you can refer this table later to have a quick view whenever you want to design your assessment. Now, here are the few examples. Definitely, I'm not going to talk in detail about it, how to use Moodle, where to use that, but I'll just talk about few aspects of it. When I was talking about diagnostic assessment, so when you want to diagnose students' prior knowledge and skills. Okay, so if you look about different activity resources, there is a huge list of options where the question, interactive content, journal, lesson, quizzes, SCORM packages, survey, wiki, workshop, Zoom meeting. See, there are a lot of options. So most of you must be having different questions, and here is nothing but a direct answer for your queries. So if you or your institute using Moodle, there's a lot of possibilities. Now it is up to you how creatively you want to use this tool and the affordances of the tool. So definitely for the diagnosis students' prior knowledge, you can always create a quiz. Here is a description of for what all purposes you can use a quiz or create a quiz. Right? And I'll just briefly read the first line. The quiz activity enables teacher to create quizzes comprising of questions of various types, including multiple choice, short answer, and numerical. See, the multiple choice questions are over here. So you can always create. Okay. So if you want to make it more fun, you can always go to Mentimeter kind of thing, and we can see if you can incorporate that. The next is, if you want to identify student needs and their expectations and motivation, which is normally happens. We don't do it in a practice because it is assumed that students are enrolled means they are motivated towards learning computer science or mechanical engineering. But even for every lecture, if you just want to create it more engaging and motivating students, you can always go for this option. So here there are choice of questions you can ask, where you can ask a quick poll to stimulate thinking about a topic. Then you can quickly test their understanding. You can facilitate their decision making. For example, allowing them to vote on a direction of the course. And this could be very important and useful for us. So if there are standard examples, you can use it in all the courses, right? So the next is, this was about diagnostic. Now this is about formative assessment. So the key purpose is improving students' learning, and when we do it during the unit of study. So again, you can use the quiz for formative assessment also. The important part, I would say, is to deliver immediate feedback about performance. Right? So in the today's classroom, if you ask a question, and if you have received the responses, and if you give immediate feedback about the performances or the right or wrong answers, that clarifies their understanding or doubts on the spot or particularly that moment. So if you remember the question about the balloon question, helium balloon question, where the way I used is to engage the students, right? But the explanation of the answer can be a part of immediate feedback or constructive feedback or an explanation. Also, you can have a self-assessment for that. So one of the important thing is workshop. So what is workshop? The workshop activity enables collection, review, and peer assessment of students' work. So you can explore more about what workshop is in if you're using Moodle. Okay. Then for providing immediate opportunity for knowledge and skills, applying knowledge and skills, you can always have, see, here are different question types: multiple choice, true and false, matching, short answer, numericals, essay, calculations, calculated multiple choice, calculated simple. So there are a lot of possibilities we have. Now, just think about if I would have shown you this part earlier and the theory behind it, I would have showed it in later part. You might not have able to match or map these two things. Correct? So whenever you're thinking about this, always go back to aligning learning objective with your assessment question, your the whole course goal, the unit goal, specific concept or topic goal, different types of assessment. If you're having unit tests, that goal. So you can always decide upon this. So you can accordingly you can now the problem is if you keep these questions ungraded, there are chances that students might not entertain much. So always try to put incentives for any of the quiz or question or reflection question you want to have. That is one recommendation I would like to have on this. So these are the quick overview about if you're assessing students online using Moodle. So I have just showed few overview of the activities, but not in detail. Definitely, it's a very small part I tried to show you. So there are multiple choice quizzes you can always go for diagnostic assessment, or you can always have assimilation quiz. This is nothing but a formative assessment where after each session or something you can have a you can give customized feedback. You must be thinking about what is customized feedback or constructive feedback. So just to tell you, so when you have three options, one is correct and two are wrong, we always just talk about explaining the reason or reasoning the correct answer. Rather than instead of that, we should give explanation for all the choices, whether it is correct or wrong. So that will help students to consider their knowledge. They will know where they went wrong or where they went correct. So, for example, in the helium balloon example, those who said the balloon will move forward, now they know, yeah, I was correct. But after the explanation, now they know why I was correct. Those who said the balloon will not move or will move backward, they must have applied some physics principle, and but now they know, oh, whatever I was thinking was wrong, or I need to clear my I need to refine my understanding of the concepts. So that kind of trigger will happen. So you need customized feedback or constructive feedback. So for calculated question, you can have problem solving practices in the form of formative assessment. This will allow you to restrict copying and sharing of the answers. Please see won't be able to talk much detail about how to use Moodle, but you can always have offline questions about this. It's about this is about workshop activity, this is about forum, and this is about assignment. So major part is if you have assignments, that is summative assessment, you can ask them to submit PDFs, or you can have comments, feedback with grading. So I'll give you one example at the end, how I have used Padlet for these kind of activity. So again, for formative assessment, you can have a discussion forum where you can rate quality of questions. Similar thing I can do in the Padlet also. If I'm not using Moodle, similar thing can be done in a Padlet where you can rate your responses. And I can also, as an instructor, reply to your comments. And anyone else can also comment on that, and that may allow some discussion. Definitely, I can export that in the form of Excel sheet, which can be accessed later on for analysis of the responses. So here for workshop activity, you can have anonymous peer review assessment. Okay. So considering based on the previous session that you must have attended in this webinar or workshop series, you must have come across one term like learning by doing activities. Okay, so this is a term from learner-centric move, where you have MCQs and short answers and objective or subjective questions. Okay, so this is nothing but some questions, and so you just recall the chunking and learning dialogue. Learning dialogue was nothing but learning videos with a reflection spot, or chunking is nothing but making small parts of your 1 hour lecture. So if you have to make 10 minutes video of your 60-minute lecture, then you will have 5 to 6 or 6 to 7 small videos, different chunks. So the LBD activities can be termed as a formative assessment between the chunks or LEDs. For each LED or each small video, you can have LBD activities, learning by doing activities. What it will allow you is immediate application and practice. So for example, if my course is about mechanical drafting, okay, and I have shown some demonstration in the video or in my live session, I can immediately give them some activity for practice. So they have to just repeat the procedure, and they can actually do the drafting part of it, and they can do the submissions in some platform. Okay. So this was one example. So creating this learning by doing activities definitely will depend on the features of online platform. So if you're using Moodle, you just have seen the different possibilities. But if you're not using Moodle, if you're an independent teacher, there are a lot of possibilities are there. You can use Padlet, Mentimeter, Google Form, Google Site. Right? Of course, it's a different level of complexity. Now you should include customized and constructive feedback. So I mentioned about the customized constructive feedback, where you can always give them examples of what is wrong, why it is wrong, what is correct. Correct? So the recommendation that we have is don't push all learning by doing activities to the end of the module. So don't always wait for a week or 15 days or a month or a semester to get over for giving them the set of learning by doing activities. Okay, break it, chunk it, and give it all the time. Not after every lecture or something. You can always think based on your topic or a subject, right? So just to tell you about how you can do the summative assessment in Moodle, there are these options available, different options. So where you can always provide grades. Okay, so you can explore more about this. Now I'll just briefly summarize this deciding assessment activity. It's weighing purpose and constraints. So the as we know, the purpose is to diagnose or to do the formative or summative assessment. There are some constraints like nature of content to be assessed. Each subject, each topic will have different nature. It needs to be aligned with instructional goals. Always remember, sometimes mess up with the instructional goal of the topic or the unit or the chapter or the whole course. So you need to have a concept map or a broad alignment of all learning goals, and you should be able to guide and form that structure of all learning goals, so that it will be easier for you to create assessment which is exactly aligned with your goal. Definitely aligning with the instructional strategies too. Then you, in a face-to-face classroom, we have a constraints of a large number of students. Same we have in a online mode. So what about if 100 students are submitting their PDFs, how to assess that? There are different ways to tackle based on your technology and affordances. Then time and effort, skill needed to design activities. So it will need some practice and some initial, what I can say, steps to go ahead with this. You can always start anytime and providing feedback. So try to have a teaching assistant for this if it is possible. Most likely postgrad students, even undergrad students, whoever is you're comfortable with. And you can think of whether this assessment is of high stakes or low stakes. Based on that, you can decide the activity. So you can, the more worry that, the major worry that teachers have is there is always scope of malpractices. Students can copy, they won't submit. So you need to be creative in designing that. But the affordances like Moodle or other tools that give, you'll always can tackle these things. Definitely technological affordances or possibilities you need to think upon. This was about the assessment session. Now, already you must be aware about the online teaching course that has created, self-paced course created by IT Bombay. So I'll just quickly browse you through with few aspects because this, okay. So if you're able to see, this is a self-paced course, and most common factors that are challenges that every teacher, including me these days, faces: preparing content, delivering content, interacting with students, and assessment. So most of the time we're talking about preparation, delivery, and interaction with students. And today we just talked about assessment. Okay. So here, if you go to this course, you will find a very simple information about how to do online assessment. So here are the some learning dialogues or videos you have. Here I have talked about different type of quizzes or questions that you can ask, file submission, collaborations, and then technologies for various type of online assessment. So here you can say that MCQ, open-ended, collaboration, file submission. So there are examples and demonstrations of Moodle, how you can use Moodle for these kind of activities. You can always access this. So then here are some guidelines for how to create videos for such type of assessment in Google Suite. Okay, Google Forms, you can see that Google Jamboard is there. Then here are some other tools for interaction: Mentimeter, Kahoot, Socrative, CFITB. Okay, and there are some things are yet to be added to the website, but these are the important aspect that I think you would like to explore more, and will definitely address some of the questions that you must be having in your mind at the moment. Okay. So before stopping, actually I want to stop here, but before stopping, I would like to give some examples of Padlet. So Padlet, what is Padlet? Padlet is an online virtual bulletin board. So you have just seen you actually participated in an activity. That is one way you can use. So your students and teacher can collaborate, reflect, share links and pictures. Okay, you can collaborate for collecting ideas, brainstorming, and more. So definitely, it's not restricted just to allow students, participants to post things. But if you can ask students to use Padlet for brainstorming for a group project. There are other tools also, and you can be part of it. So it will always be available and visible for everyone. So there are ways to use it. So how did I use it recently? In one of my recent animation sessions, I asked a question. I asked the audience to think for a few minutes, and I asked them to post it on Padlet. Now, what was the question? So the session was about animation. Okay. Now the animation terms sounds very generic, and everybody thinks that they know the animation. So even if I ask you, what do you mean by animation? You must be thinking so many things about animation. You can think of Tom and Jerry. You can think of any latest movie. You can think of any scientific animation process. So many things you can think of. So instead of me telling them the definition, I wanted to understand what they know about animation. Whether they copy, whether they discuss, doesn't matter. So I asked them to think for a couple of minutes and I asked them to post on the Padlet. So here I already pre-created the Padlet with different columns so that they can just keep on adding their responses. So here if you see, almost like in that session, 184 participants responded with that. So you could see different ways people are talking about animation. Computer creative work, computer graphics, very much technical, animated characters. Somebody talking about technology, computer generated images, moving images. So almost there are a huge set of responses were there, right? So this is, and then definitely I explained them the standard definition of animation. So this kind of activity can be used as a diagnosis assessment, where I know now this person actually thinks that moving images is animation, but that is one example, right? So how did I use it differently? Okay, same method, but this time the concept and the activity was different. So I actually demonstrated a 3D modeling technique online where I created some object and I asked the participants to create a 3D model after the activity and asked them to post their output on the Padlet. Okay, so I'll show you what I did. So this is how I showed them the demonstration of 3D modeling in the Blender tool. Blender is a 3D animation tool. Like in the first part you mentioned, you must have heard of it. And then I asked them to create the model and ask them to post on the Padlet. So you can see different submissions that students have. Now I can see all the submission at one platform. I don't even need to go back to change the files. I can click on the file, I can maximize the file, I can add my feedback. People can rate these submissions. You can see some of them have rated. So this is definitely, these kind of techniques will work for different contexts. This might not be suitable for something else. In another example, I have some faculty participants who were supposed to make presentations on learner-centric MOOC. So it's very small group workshop was there. So 20 participants submitted their presentations over here, their videos over here. So, and use that Padlet to make their presentations, to ask them present and to give them feedback live. So this is these are the ways you can actually use these technologies and tools. You can more learn about this in the sites that I mentioned. You can always go back to this online course, and there are a lot of FAQs also there. Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much for being patient and listening to me. Let me see.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah. You can always get back to me with your feedback or criticism for this talk, and if there are questions that are not answered, I'll be sharing the slides after the session.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, sir. You have given a very nice awareness about Blender tool, assessment tools, Padlets, so many things. Thank you very much for having such a nice session for us. Now I request a participant to ask the question directly. So here it is a question by Dr. Momi.
Sir,
Yeah.
thank you, sir. Sir has given a very wide explore for all the tools. Only thing is that this tools needs to be get aware with the student. That is also possible. We need to conduct initially a small session for student how to use this tool or how to respond on this tool. It's a very nice tool, sir. Menti is also nice and Padlet is also nice. Yeah. Good tool.
Yeah, before any comment,
Voice is not coming.
Voice is breaking, sir. Your voice is breaking somewhere.
Yeah, so what I was just saying hi to Professor Momi. It's good to see you after almost like a decade.
Okay, you might be knowing him.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So if there are any questions that I would have missed, Professor Deshmukh, please you can compile those and you can share with me. I can.
Yes. There is one more question by Vernam Deke. Can you just ask your question? So I'm just checking chat and I'm going to give an opportunity to the people who are interested to ask the question now. And later on, they can mail us and then I can share what are the questions they have. Yeah. Vernam DK.
So I could say how to add multiple users or participants in Padlet.
Yeah.
So users, you definitely, the owner, you can just, and there is a link where you can enable posting enable for the users. Nothing else you have to do. And you can always log in and have the access. The tools are paid or free to use. The Padlet is free version allows you to have 3 Padlets. Paid version, you can have as many Padlets. For Mentimeter, as of now, there is no such limit for basic utility of quizzes and all. But if you want to export your data and if you want to do very heavy work onto that, then you always have a paid version of it. But since most of the institutes are using Moodle kind of things, LMSs, my personal take onto it is the free versions are sufficient to create these kind of activities. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we will take a break now. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for gracing our session.
Thank you, Professor Deshmukh.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Sure. So I will have an announcement for participant because our last session, that is a panel discussion, is scheduled at 2:30. So previous sessions where we are starting at 3 o'clock, but to make it a short and sweet end of it, that's what we scheduled at 2:30. We are going to have a connected valedictory session later on. So kindly join at 2:30 online with the same link. Thank you. So thank you, Kapil sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.